All right. Now, we're up to chapter 4 in Revelation. And, okay, I've given you a lot on the last couple. Fortunately, we've cut this one down. And actually, we're going to go through 4 and 5 today because we've got some trouble in heaven. We've got a bit of a difficulty that's happening up in heaven. Now, we've studied and we've looked at the first 3 chapters. We've established that Jesus is the authority for the book of Revelation par excellence. Jesus is the center of it. And then he's gone through and given a message to the 7 churches. And chapter 4 starts with this line that says, "After these things I looked, and beheld a door standing open in heaven. And the first voice which I heard was like a trumpet, speaking with me, saying, 'Come up here, and I will show you things which must take place after this.'" Now, this is a timely message that we need to understand where it fits into the center of things. After the messages to the churches were delivered, John goes into this door. But it doesn't happen after those churches. If we remember from chapter, and I'll just open it up here. If we remember from chapter 1, there's a separation between when the messages started to be delivered and the actual messages. So John was writing to the 7 churches in Asia, and the messages come from grace and peace from Jesus Christ, the faithful witness, and then the messages were delivered basically between this verse 11 and 12. So between 11 and 12 exist chapters 2 and 3. So then John turns around to see this individual, and then after he looks and sees this individual, because again, it's the voice of many waters, this voice of trumpets, after that, he sees the events in chapter 4 and 5. So the events of chapter 4 and 5 don't follow the churches. They follow John seeing Jesus. Is that clear?
Oh, okay.
Yep.
All right, so as we said, this part here where it says, "I'm the Alpha and the Omega," what you see right in this book, that happens after verse 11 is John sees the visions of these 7 churches. Then after he sees the visions of the 7 churches, he then sees who gave him those comments. So that's an important distinction, because the timeline of chapter 4 and 5 does not move after the visions of the churches. The timeline is after he had come out of seeing those messages, he saw who gave him those messages, and then he sees this door in heaven. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's...
So it's actually presented... So he saw the messages,
Yep.
and then he saw Jesus.
Yeah, he saw the messages, so that's it. I, John,
So
your
the
brother...
messages came first, then... So chapter 2 and 3 came first, chapter 1 came second,
No.
and chapter...
No.
No. Chapter 1 came first, but it
Yep.
only goes part way through.
Yeah.
Then he sees 2 and 3, and then he goes back to chapter 4. Then he goes back to chapter 1. Then he saw and turned around and saw the voice, heard the voice, and saw the bloke.
Because it says here, I, John, your brother and companion in the tribulation and kingdom and the patience, was on the island of Patmos for the word of God, for the testimony of Jesus. I was in the spirit of the Lord's day. I heard a voice behind me like a trumpet saying, "I'm the Alpha and the Omega. What you see, write in a book to these 7 churches." After that line, after verse 11, he then saw the visions of the 7 churches. Because then he turns to see the voice that spoke with him. He had this vision of these 7 churches, he dictated what the voice said, and then he turned around to see who that voice was.
Okay, yeah,
Does that make sense?
yeah.
So, after that's done, and Jesus says, right, now I've given you this little bit of an explanation because some of these things don't make sense to you, so I'll tell you that the 7 stars are the gold, and the 7 golden lampstands are the angels of the 7 churches. So just so that you know, here's some information. And then John turns around and sees a door opening and says, "Come here and I will show you things which must take place after this moment when you are seeing Jesus, after this time you are currently living in." It's a little bit confusing, but it patters out with the storyline that we've got. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
Thank
okay.
you.
So these are not things after Laodicea. And so John goes immediately into the Spirit, and behold, a throne set in heaven, and one sat on the throne. So John goes into the Spirit again, and he's taken and sees a throne set in the heavens. And there's a character sitting on this throne. He's again in vision, but he can't identify who this person is. He just sees a presence sitting on this throne. It's a rather interesting way of saying that he's not seeing a human sitting on the throne. He's seeing a presence sitting on the throne. Something is sitting there. He who sat there was like jasper and sardis stone in appearance. There was a rainbow around the throne in an appearance like an emerald. Now, jasper and sardis are both reddish-brown, semi-precious stones, but they have extremely rich colours. When we were talking about Gabriel and talking about Jesus, we were talking about bronze and brass. Now we're talking about this reddish, semi-precious stone. We're talking about this deeper colour, this more depth to it. So now we get this idea that this person sitting on the throne has that reddish appearance, a different appearance to the Son and to Gabriel. And it's interesting that this would have been a very relatable colour, a very tanned colour, to the people that were living in the Mediterranean at the time. Because of the last 2,000 years of paintings, we have this idea that Jesus was blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and white. Jesus was absolutely not. He would have been olive-skinned, as we've already said. So now we have this vision that this character is a deep reddish colour, which would have been somewhat relatable. They would have recognised this. And it's this addition of this rainbow that makes something interesting. A rainbow around the throne appearing like an emerald. John is trying to relate back to what Ezekiel saw, because again, he's writing to people who know these books well. Ezekiel in chapter 1 said he saw the likeness of a throne in appearance like a sapphire stone. On the likeness of the throne was the likeness of a man high above it. Also from the appearance of his waist upward I saw the cloud of amber. Amber's a lighter red, and with the appearance of fire all around it. From his appearance the waist downward I saw the appearance of fire with brightness all around. Like the appearance of a rainbow on a cloudy day, so was the appearance of the brightness all around it. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. John the Revelator is trying to connect his experience to Ezekiel's, but also draw out differences between them. The amber is a lighter colour, it's a lighter sort of feel, whereas this jasper and sardis is a deeper, richer red. There's fire in Ezekiel's phrase, but there's no fire in John's. The sapphire stone is a bit bluer, whereas in John's it is an emerald stone, which is green. But the rainbow is universal. The rainbow sits in both of them. What is interesting about these is these differences in colour. A blue is a rich, respectful, but it's a peaceful colour that was always associated with Passover and with Hanukkah, while the green is a symbol of rebirth and resurrection. So the God looking towards the Passover in Ezekiel has now seen it completed by the time this green comes about to shine around the throne. And this rainbow that's ever present is the constraining aspect of God's power. This rainbow that we see here in both of these versions is a restraint on God. He has made a promise that he will never put down anybody, he will never destroy the earth. This is a constraint God has put on himself. It is the one who wrote the law and the one who has constrained himself by his own promises. So it's rather interesting how John is connecting himself to Ezekiel, but he's very free in relaxing that and moving away from those connections. He's moving away from that association. So he's saying this is the same scene in form, but not in practice. It's the same scene that you know has happened. And we have to remember, we're dealing with, by this time, 4,000 odd years of people walking around with Jesus, walking around with God, and having these stories being passed down. This is a very, very relatable scene to the people that he's writing to. It's not so relatable to us because we've forgotten it, but it was a relatable scene to them. Around the throne were 24 thrones. So there's 24 seats around this throne, and on those thrones I saw 24 elders, sitting clothed in white, and they had crowns of gold on their heads. These elders are individuals that surround God's throne. And who are these people? Who are these characters that come into play? We find a little bit later in chapter 5 that these are the 24 elders who fell down before the Lamb, each having a harp and a golden bowl of incense, who claimed and said to the Lamb, "You were slain and have redeemed us to God by your blood. Out of every tribe, tongue, and people and nation have made us kings and priests on earth, and we shall reign on the earth." These 24 individuals are the first fruits of the redeemed. Jesus is the first fruit of the resurrection, but these are the first fruits of the redeemed. They definitely would include Elijah and Moses, in my opinion. Elijah was taken up to heaven and was the representation of all those who would not taste death. Moses is the representation of all those who would. But they would also include several of those others that were saved by the first when Christ was resurrected. Who they are specifically is not recorded, and I'm inflecting that I say it's Elijah and Moses, but these are they who have been saved. These are they who have been put in, and their privilege is to sit in the presence of the Almighty. They have their own thrones. These are not simply courtiers who mingle around. These are not simply blokes who are a part of the court. These are the ones who actually advise God the Father, and experience his very presence all the time. They have crowns of gold on their heads because they are, as they say, kings and priests. These are those who are the leaders of the saved. This is an incredible group of 24 individuals that we see here that are surrounding God's throne. And from the throne comes out lightning, thunders, and voices. There are 7 lamps burning before the throne, and there's a sea of glass like crystal. It's a powerful demonstration that these 24 individuals are sitting in. There's noise, light, fire, power, and a demonstration of the strength of God, along with those 7 representations of God, which we've seen are analogous with the 7 churches. This is the fire that burns in God for his people. This is God's passion for his people. Now, this sea of glass is a fascinating connection. It's again mirroring Ezekiel that John has of something that John finds very difficult to describe. John doesn't want to actually know how to put this into words. It has to be clear and stable, yet it also has to be transparent, and it amplifies the reflections of everything around him. Ezekiel said, in the midst of the throne and around the throne... John continues and says that this step back. This transparency offers a protection, but also a separation. So this God and these 24 elders can see down to the earth. Nothing is hidden from them. They're able to see everything, but they are stable and unable to interact. There's a separation there. There's a rather distinct separation that comes by putting a glass floor underneath you. You're not able to interact with the things below you, because to do so you'd fall down. That's a rather interesting study from these 24 people, and that's why the 24 elders are there, because God the Father, where he did step on the earth, would wipe everything out. But in addition to them, and in the midst of the throne and around the throne, were 4 living creatures, full of eyes in front and back. The first creature was like a lion, the second like a calf, the third like the face of a man, the fourth like a flying eagle. The 4 living creatures have 6 wings, were full of eyes, and they do not rest day or night. Instead they repeat, Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. These are indescribable characters. These 4 beasts that stand around the throne of God, and when we say 4, it's an important number. These are the 4 that demonstrate a level of universality. One would stand on each corner of the throne. One represents each of the winds of heaven. One represents the dominance over the 4 aspects of nature, earth, fire, wind, and water. These are the ones who surround it. They each have different qualities, and they each have 6 wings, and don't have to turn their heads to look. They're full of eyes. They see everything. And as we're going to find as we keep looking through the book, these 4 creatures are the 4 most powerful things in existence. These are the 4 most powerful created beings ever. It's in fact theorized, and I'm willing to stand behind this, that when Lucifer rebelled, they had to replace Lucifer with 4 creatures because of the amount of power that he wielded in heaven, and because of the events that they do in the surrounding of this world. Now, they're each given different qualities. The calf is a symbol of wealth and management in the Jewish nation. The lion is strong and brave and given to war and power, and Jesus, of course, is called the Lion of Judah. The man is intelligent and decisive, the highest evolution, and he's able to use much more than simple rudimentary tools. And the eagle is an emblem of swiftness and wisdom. It flies high above the plains and it sees everything that it's trying to look for. These creatures spend all their time engaging with these things. These are the 4, if you will, assassins that God has around his throne. Now, who are these 4 creatures? Who are these 4 actors? Are they angels? that's one of those questions that perplex scholars, and we're so removed from heaven we don't know. We have to remember as we study this book that what happened in AD 70, the wiping out of the Jewish nation, removed so much of the living history that we had that connected us with heaven. From AD 70, when the church in Jerusalem was burnt down, we lost so much of what we knew before that we will never be able to recover. We now know that there are two orders of angels. There are seraphim, which have 6 wings, that exist above the throne and cry, holy, 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 as Isaiah says in Isaiah 6. And we know of cherubim with 4 wings that are implied to be much more numerous and active. These are the armies of God. They're the ones that interact with a lot more. And these creatures don't fit either of the descriptions that we have for them. I would argue they're not angels at all. I'd argue that saying they are living creatures, the 4 living creatures, is a better way of saying them. But these are the 4 powerhouses that God gives his instructions to. These are the ones that go and distribute information to the world and to the universe. These are the 4 characters that do God's bidding when he instructs them to. And these are, I would argue, the most powerful created beings currently in existence, with the possible exception of Lucifer. Now, whenever the... Yeah?
Is there a parallel between these creatures and the Gospels and how Jesus is portrayed in the Gospels? I mean, I seem to have heard that somewhere along the way. You know how, I'm not quite sure which way to go, but how Matthew is like, Jesus is the king, I think. Mark is, I don't know, the servant. Sorry, what is it?
Slave. Jesus,
Slave.
Matthew presents Jesus as a king. Mark presents him as a slave, and a very lowly slave at that. Luke presents him as a man, a common man, and John presents him as God. If you look at the way the 4 Gospels are structured, they each have those different sets to them. If you look in Fred's notes, you'll find his book on the Gospels, where he goes into that in quite some detail. You'll find, for example, Matthew presents Christ's lineage through his father. And he presents it through his father because you care about the monarchy, you care about the lineage of a king through his father. Mark ignores his lineage, but Mark uses the word "and" to start his book a tremendous number of times and leaves most of the things out, because nobody cares about a slave, right? As Jesus being a slave on the earth. And I use the word slave advisedly. No, Mark leaves out so much stuff, like he doesn't have the phrase "it is finished" because a slave's work is never done. He doesn't care about the sufferings of Jesus in the same way, because all slaves suffer. They're there to suffer. That's their whole point. He uses the word "and" to start most of his verses, let alone his chapters. Luke, on the other hand, includes a lot of contextual details, like he includes his lineage through his mother, where they leave a couple of people out compared to Corinthians, and those sorts of things. And then John, of course, opens and closes with God, but interestingly, John ignores the resurrection as a turning point. He has it in there, but he ignores the resurrection as a turning point because God is just God. I mean, God can't stay dead for long. So it's you could be right on that. The calf is the symbol of wealth and management. That could lead to a connection with a king. Lion, strong and brave, the Lion of Judah. Again, there's a royalty there. There's a strength there. The man, the human individual. There's a good power there. Eagle is wisdom. You could say that that's God rising above things and looking at things from an intellectual difference. I just don't see the slave one quite so much.
No,
that's not something I've studied, but it's certainly possible that there's a correlation there. But
yeah, I thought I'd heard sometime that there was a link, but evidently not.
It may just be something I'm not seeing.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm really interested to hear you describe these as the 4 most powerful created things, other than perhaps Satan. So
that becomes more and more apparent as we go through the book. That becomes more and more. When you talk about the 4 bowls, for example, the pouring out of the 4 bowls in, I think it's 1819, they are done by one of these 4 creatures, and they are the most dramatic plagues on Earth. So when we get there, we'll see just how powerful these things are. And it's also these 4 beings that take the lead in a lot of ways. And I think it's here in chapter 5, if I remember correctly. No, it's the elders. In chapter 6, when we will start to see the revealing of the seals, it's these 4 creatures that tell John to come and see what's going on. These are the ones who take that authority. These are the ones who have stood beside God throughout all of his combat with the devil.
Well,
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Good. Keep it going. Sorry to have taken you off on that little tangent.
No, you're right. That's cool. Okay, so whenever the living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to him who sits on the throne, who sits forever and ever, the 24 elders themselves fall down before him who sits on the throne and worship him and cast their crowns before the throne, saying, "You are worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and by your will they exist and were created." So the actions of these 4 creatures cause those around the throne to pay homage to God. There's a trigger, there's an incentive there to say, right, I'm going to give glory to God, so everybody else does the same thing. There's a supplication. They discard the honors they have been given by God, considering them as nothing. They throw their crowns before the throne saying, I am worth nothing. You are worthy, O God, to receive glory and honor. The reference here is that this is the creator God, which becomes another moniker. And I'd argue that it's the senior title of all of God's titles. Without the creator God, nothing exists. Without him being the creator, there is no point to anything else being there. So this is the most important of the titles that God has. And we see that these 24 elders respond to these 4 creatures doing this. When these 4 creatures give them the nudge, they then say, we will also acknowledge you in this way. These are those who have been, as I said, brought up from the earth, and they are the ones who say to him, you are worthy to receive glory and honor and power. You created all things, and by your will they exist. So they're acknowledging the Father as the most powerful creature in the universe, without any qualification, certainly more powerful than the things that he's created. But they're also acknowledging that he is able to receive all glory and honor. They're supplicating everything that they have done that has brought them to the point to be one of those 24 as being at his will. And that's the end of chapter 4. Chapter 4 sets up the context for heaven. It gives John something to work with. Chapter 4 is there specifically to set up what happens in chapter 5. Because in chapter 5, the whole world breaks loose. I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll written on the inside and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. I saw a strong angel proclaim with a loud voice, who is worthy to open and the scroll and to loose its seals? And no one in heaven or earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or look at it. And so I wept much, because no one was found worthy to open or read that scroll or to look at it. John is presenting a picture of God the Father. He is the creator, acknowledged by the most powerful creatures, acknowledged by the first fruits of the saved, acknowledged by the universe. Everybody is sitting here, and he notices that in his hand he has this little book. A big guy walks in and says, "Who's able to open this book?"
Yeah, no one.
What about the guy holding it? God the Father couldn't open that book? Hold on a second. He's holding a thing in his hand he can't open. That destroys John. Because John has just realized a limitation for God the Father. We have suddenly put an actual limit on something God the Father is experiencing. Because he certainly doesn't say he can open it. This has to be the most astonishing thing. And John says, I wept much. I read in one of Fred's notes, one of the phrases was, the book of Revelation was not written without tears, and neither will it be studied without tears. This is a devastating moment. But let's dig into it. Let's put our emotions aside, and let's try and dig into it. What do we mean? Now, as I've got a picture here, when we say a book, we mean a scroll. We mean a scroll like this. Now, a scroll like this would have been a letter, it would have been some sort of an important document. Typically, if it was a letter or something, it would have had one of these seals on it. But The fact there are 7 makes it a very, very important document. Most likely, in fact, the only explanation I've seen that makes it even remotely reasonable is that this is a will. This is someone's last will and testament. This is a document that demonstrates who their inheritance is going to be and why. 7 is an important number in Roman society, and it was also an important number in Jewish society, as we've seen, because 7 was the highest ranks. There were 7 ranks in the Cursus Honorum. There were 7 was one of the higher numbers when it came to their religion for different things. These seals are not just anybody's seals. When the will was written, it was sealed up by the 7 witnesses, the 7 individuals that were able to hold, that were able to say that they had seen this will being sealed. And in turn, they would have to be present, or at least representatives of them who knew their seals, would have to be present when this will was read. So this is a tremendously important document, and you can tell what's going on. God the Father has in his hands the will of Jesus Christ, the only person that it could be. Who else has any claim to any inheritance in heaven? After all, you have these 24 witnesses who are the inheritance of him in heaven. He's saved them. You have these 24 are the only people who've been on earth who've had any experience with death, so anything that they would have inherited would be on earth, and, that's all going to get wiped out. We don't need to care about that. The reference to the rainbow is because of the fire that we'll see later, so we don't need to think about those people. And all the angels, of course, aren't going to die, so there's no point for them having a will. The only logical person whose will this could be is Jesus Christ's. And a will like this would have been very, very relatable to these people, to these Roman society people, especially the ones who were living in higher society. But there's a problem. The only person that could open the will has to be of the same rank, or a higher rank, than the person who wrote it. A king could open a king's will, for example, or a prime minister would open a prime minister's will. Usually it would even be their successor. That's why we see in Shakespeare, in Mark Antony, at the end of Julius Caesar, why Mark Antony reads Julius Caesar's will, because he's positioning himself as a successor. Who in heaven could open this will? Who has the authority of heaven to open Christ's will? That's the question that's being asked here. Who?
God.
Why? What right does God the Father have to open Christ's will? God the Father doesn't know anything. God the Father's never experienced suffering. Let me rephrase that. God the Father's never experienced human suffering. God the Father doesn't have that same connection with earth. He doesn't have that same connection with those 24 elders. Those 24 elders don't have the power to be at the level of God to open Christ's will. Christ isn't there. Christ is, as we just seen, walking around with the 7 churches. This consternation comes because nobody has the power or the authority in heaven to open Christ's will. Even God the Father can't do it because he himself hasn't experienced those. Adam and Eve only spent time in the Garden of Eden, and nobody else has spent enough time in both places to hold the right to open this will. That's a powerful document. That's an incredible thing. When you consider what this is, the inheritance of all those who are living on earth, that's an incredible piece that even God the Father doesn't think it appropriate to open. And even if, and we have to admit, he certainly has the power to open this document. There's no question there. He has the power. But it's his son's inheritance. What right does he have to give away his son's property? That would break his own law. This is an incredible scene that I think doesn't get enough attention. Who is worthy to open the scroll and loose these seals? That's a really dramatic set of statements. Who are these 7 witnesses as well? Now, in some really, really extreme cases, the 7 witnesses could open it. If there was a major decapitation of the authority figures, then it's possible that the 7 witnesses could open them. So who are these 7 witnesses? Who saw Christ do all the things that will become his inheritance? Well, I'd argue it's the 7 churches. Who else could actually claim the new covenant, the inheritance of all this, as their birthright, except for those who have been reborn into it? It has to be the 7 ages of the churches that we've just discussed. Those 7 churches, those 7 experiences with Christ, are the 7 witnesses that exist on this earth. But they can't open it. They're groups of people. They're groups of experiences. They're groups of symbolic collectives. They aren't able to open it, and they don't have the authority to open it. So who on earth can open this document? It's really quite a powerful thing. This is a rather important statement. But one of the elders comes over to John and touches him on the shoulder and says, "Don't weep. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has prevailed to open the scroll and loose its seals." Prevailed to open the scroll. He didn't just choose to open it. He has won the right to open the scroll. This Lion of Judah has won the authority to open the scroll. "And I looked and beheld in the midst of the throne and of the four living creatures and in the midst of the elders a lamb as though it had been slain, having 7 horns, 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out to all the earth. He came and took the scroll out of his right hand, who sat on the throne." There in the midst of the throne, alongside the Father, as we will see when we eventually look at Hebrews, alongside the Father in that same sort of connection, we there have the Son as a lamb that was slain. He has the authority because of his death. By his death, he has earned the right to give the inheritance to the people. He is able to step up to the Father and take that document. He doesn't ask for it. He came and took the document. He is the only actor in the universe that is able to take that scroll out of his hand. This is that powerful power that this Jesus has. And he has won these forces. Now, it's rather interesting the language that's used here. This lamb that was slain has 7 horns and 7 eyes. These are the spirits of God sent out into all the earth, not just to the churches. These are sent out to all the earth. Horns, we've already seen, are the authorities and principalities that we have that exist on the face of the planet. We saw that when we were discussing Daniel. John is again relating this back to Daniel. But if this is on all the earth, it's not just in the 7 churches we just looked at. It's also the Waldenses or Sabbatarian Indian and Japanese Christians. It's those that have worked around and with God no matter where they are. This is a universal power. This is not just related to Europe. This is everywhere. These are when Christ whispers in kings and emperors' ears, like we saw in Daniel chapter 10. This is everywhere. This power is not just able to give an inheritance to those who are in the Christian faith. He has earned the right to all the earth where the 7 spirits of God are. It blows up into a bigger thing when you look at this and says it's not just that the 7 spirits are a part of the churches, they're everywhere. Now, we do need to examine a little bit about this scroll and what looks to be important for the next couple of chapters. This will is inheritance, and each of these 7 seals will need to be broken in turn. Now, if each of these 7 seals, as I'm conjecturing, represents one of the 7 churches, we can layer that this opening of the book, and it's no mystery that chapter 6 is about the opening of the 7 seals, with the 7th being in chapter 8. If this is a layering on of these 7 churches, then this opening of the book is going to take place over a period of time. We're going to have to map these churches to these 7 seals as we go. If these 7 churches are the ones that give Christ the right and say, we have worked with him, and act as a witness to say that he has done and been just to us, that gives him that authority that says, yes, we will certify this is correct, then we can see that there is a connection between this book and those 7 churches, those 7 time periods. The longed-for second coming, however, and we can be clear on this, can only happen after the will is open. The inheritance, which is the second coming, the return to heaven, the being brought back up, can only happen after that 7th seal is concluded. What's more, we get to add to this a period of the millennium, because if we look at that 7th church and say even that it ends at the second coming, the millennium that we're going to talk about later adds a little bit extra to this, because there's a lot of things that happen to happen here. And one of the questions, as I said to you, which is often asked, is why can't God the Father open the document? The reason is he hasn't experienced the same thing. He can act as God in accepting the sacrifice as author of the law, but he cannot act as the high priest in its completion. When we look at the priestly imagery, which is another thing that comes in that we relate to this scroll, for admittance to heaven, for admittance to this, there is a purification work that has to be played out. If you think about when you have an inheritance, if you inherit a house, for example, there's always bits and pieces in that house that will go to other people. There are elements of that house, furniture, heirlooms that are going to go to other people. They have to be divvied up before the final house is transferred over. So, in the same way that those of us who come up to the heaven are going to have to be purified, we're going to have to go through a process and a time frame of this purification. Paul discusses this very heavily in Hebrews. We've already seen this in Daniel chapter 8. For 2,300 years, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. The cleansing of the people is an important work that has to be completed before the end of the seals is broken. So as we start to relate these things, we start to see this idea as Jesus is high priest, and of these time frames and these seals and this protection before the second coming starts to layer itself on top of each other. And this is where things can get complicated. So I want to introduce it now so that we can start getting used to these couple of layers as we go. This Jesus as high priest is something we relate back to, and this temple work is something we relate back to when things happen. But are you with me on what I'm saying here? That we've got the 7 seals that each will have to be broken, that then in turn relate to those churches that have to have their time periods added on, and then there is a protection, healing, sanctifying work that has to be done before this inheritance can take place. Are you both with me on that, or am I lost you?
No, I can stay with you.
Yeah.
I know it's complicated. I know it's complicated, David, but are you with me?
Yeah, I'm with you for the moment. Yes.
Okay, good. That's
don't give us a test.
No, not yet. The test come later. Now, when he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each having a harp and a golden bowl full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. These 24 elders sang a new song, saying, "You are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals. You were slain, you have redeemed us to God by your blood, out of every tribe and tongue and people and nation, and have made us kings and priests to our God. We will reign on the earth." Now the elders owe everything to Christ. That's just clear. These are people who were redeemed by his blood. But these 4 creatures bow down to the Son. These 4 powerful beings humble themselves in the same manner before the Son as if it was the Father. And that's not to the indignity of the Father. They stand and they humble themselves before the Son who has experienced the joys of heaven and the depths of earth. He has been the only character, and it will be the only character, that can have been on the absolute top doing the creation work in the very beginning of time, and to feel the depths and devastation of questioning your own salvation. The sacrifice of Jesus is something we just keeps blowing our mind every time we add these layers into it. And that's why these 4 living creatures themselves, the most powerful in the universe, bow down to him and say, "You are the one who is worthy of this honor. You are worthy to take that scroll. You are worthy to open its seals because of your sacrifice." Now, the elders hold a harp and a bowl of incense. The incense is a symbol. These are not actual prayers. These are the symbols of prayers of the saints. We say that because they are very clear. Right? The prayers of the saints are very clear to God. And when you see incense burning, it has a very distinct smoke pattern because of very fine particles. They're not actual prayers that are being held there, like the Romans will tell you, that are actually being passed on. This is just the beautiful smell of those experiencing God. Even those who cry alongside Christ can recognize their suffering and be a part of their suffering because he knows what it's like to be there. So he experiences and recognizes that these people who are suffering are doing good because they're still on his side. They're reaching out to him. They're doing the right thing. They're staying close to the covenant. He's not happy they're going through suffering, obviously, but he's saying it'll be over soon. The harps is where we get this idea that these people sit on clouds and strum harps and all that sort of fun stuff. But the thing is that they are acclaiming Jesus. They're singing a new song, something that hasn't been heard on this earth. and saying, "You are worthy to take that scroll and open its seals." So the four living creatures again bring these four elders in to worship the Lamb. But we have even more now. Then I looked, and I heard a voice of many angels around the throne, the living creatures and the elders. The number was 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands of thousands, saying with a loud voice, "Worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power, riches and wisdom, and strength and honor and glory and blessing." So now we've got more people joining in, right? These guys all worship God the Father, but now we've got a bunch of more people joining in. All the angels watching, those same angels that a moment ago were bawling their eyes out about this book that couldn't be read, they're now singing along and crying out, "Worthy is the Lamb." This is the 10,000 times 10,000 that we've been talking about in Daniel, that are the armies of God. This is who Michael led in Daniel 10 when he said, "I've got to lead my armies in combat." These are the same people we're going to see him lead in Revelation 12. These are the warriors of heaven who were so distraught, who fought against Lucifer, here acclaiming Christ as having power. But it doesn't end there.
But isn't Michael also Christ?
Yes. But I'm saying these are Michael's armies. These are Christ's armies. I'm just identifying these 10,000 times 10,000 are his armies. Yeah. So there's all these characters, and then also every creature in heaven and on the earth, under the earth, such as were in the sea, and all that are in them. Additionally say, "Blessing and honor and glory and power be it to him who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb forever and ever." All this time, all the creatures in heaven and earth, all creatures in the universe, join in acclaiming the Lamb as being the one who has glory, power forever and ever. This is the acclamation that the sacrifice Christ made was worthy, that it was right. The sacrifice he made was secured, and it is fixed for us to accept. There's no more sacrifice needs to be made. This is the moment where the entire universe, in judging God the Father, which is something we'll get to later, in judging God, actually says that the sacrifice was worthy to redeem those from the earth, to redeem them from the destruction of the law. But the final word is given to these four creatures, who simply say, "Amen." That word "Amen," remember, means it is so. It has been decreed. This is how it is. That's done. This is it. He is worthy to open the book. He is worthy to receive power and riches. He is worthy to strengthen and honor. He is worthy for all this. And the four most powerful creatures in the universe say, "And so be it." They have certified Christ's sacrifice as accomplished, and everything is good. This is now protecting all those whose names are written in that inheritance. That inheritance is the book of life. When we talk about the book of life that we keep saying, it's that scroll that we keep referencing. It's that document there that has your name and my name written in it. That document, when it is open, will find us worthy. That is the document that has our salvation secured. That's 2 chapters. Questions? Comments? Yell at me.
Oh, I've got to take it all in.
You got to take that in. That's 2 chapters, and that's half of one of the last chapters we've done. That's only 5,000 words. We did 10,000 the last 2.
I love the I love the concentric circles around the throne. You know, You've got God the Father on the throne, then the living creatures and the 24 elders, then the angels, I think, isn't it? Then every living creature around.
Yep. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's why I say I think John intended to write it in that form. He intended to write it for the people that would be listening. I don't think he intended to write it for all of posterity, although we're all very, very glad that he did. But I think it's certainly written so that everybody can relate to what's being said.
Yep.
Any questions or comments, or we have a prayer to finish?
So
up?
it's going to go on from here and open those seals. That's what happened.
Yeah.
Chapter 6, we open the seals. We find out a bit about that. But because we've established the time frames that relate to the churches, we have to follow those time frames on with the seals. So we will talk a bit about that and things that happen. And we get to meet the 4 horsemen.
Yeah. The
I haven't learned.
apocalypse.
I haven't learned to ride horses yet.
I haven't heard it said that that's the book of life. I mean, I can get it. It's like you're saying it's Jesus' last will and testament, which is really the redemption of all the people that he saved or that have accepted his salvation.
Yeah. When the books are opened, which is the phrase we keep using, when the roll is called up yonder, when the books are open, all those sorts of fun little quips that we like to have in our really old hymns, but where else can they come from except from this document? What else would they be written in except for his will?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting, James.
All right, let's have a prayer to close up.
No worries.
Heavenly Father, we thank you this afternoon that we can come together again to study your word and to study 2 chapters. We thank you that they're a bit more story-based and not quite so heavy this time so that we can take it in a little bit easier, but we thank you for their importance. We thank you for this scroll. We thank you that you have, of what you have done to be able to be worthy to open it. We thank you for that sacrifice, Lord, and we pray that we will be found written in it together when that roll is called up yonder. I pray that you will guide and direct us always in your holy and precious name and will, and help us to always do what you have in store for us. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.